What is up, fellow football fans, and welcome back to another edition of the ONETA Show, brought to you by PTE Creative. Now, welcome back. Apologies on the missing show last week. Beyond some things that were just going on technically that were making that extremely difficult for me to get that up for you. More importantly, I've been working on a big project here for the podcast, and that is this. How to put the time in to fix college football. It is time to fix college football. Now, you'll probably be hinted at that the NCAA's got to go, and we've got to get closer to that college football playoff model. And you may think, what do you mean by that? But once we get closer to that college football playoff style model, we'll all have as wonderful a smile as Shedeur Sanders in this picture. Now, going back. I usually stick to professional football on this podcast. It's far more what I love and what I'm comfortable with. However, I do have a large affection for college football, as it is even closer to the most foundational pieces of what make football such a great sport, what make it such a wonderful, wonderful experience for so many across this country and the world round now, as we're getting to be such more of an international sport. And I'm excited because I'm getting more and more into college football, and I love getting into the nitty-gritty of the politics of it, the conferences, how do media deals get made. I love all that stuff. That is why I think it is time to propose something to fix college football. So this is part 1 of 3. So part 1 of this new model, we'll be going into suggestions on how to fix college football. Fix in quotations, because everyone will have different opinions on that. But how I would personally go about fixing college football to make it a better place for athletes, teams, schools, who would have you. Part 2, we're going to get into new conferences. So yes, I have redivided all 134 FBS schools into new conferences, and that is for very, very good and special reasons for that, to make sure that this is a more perfect union. And finally, I'm going to go into a new college football playoff format and why I would be doing the things that I'd be doing to make sure that we get the best possible output into this. Without further ado, it's time. It's time to fix college football, and that is why I have to say, with a wonderful, wonderful oath here. We, the fans of college football, in order to form a more perfect union, establish the College Football Alliance to ensure football tranquility, provide for the common quality, and promote the general welfare of competition, and secure the blessings of Saturday to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this College Football Alliance. Now, is that a wild way to say that? Of course it is. But it's in order to say that we need a more perfect union, and I thought, why not go to the Constitution just to do it for some fun? Now, there needs to be a disclaimer on all of this. College football already operates extremely well, and by that we can say it makes plenty of money. We can say that there is general competition, but it's tiered competition for the most part. And that millions and millions of people across this country and now internationally all do enjoy college football in some way, shape, or form. But it is far from perfect. It needs to get better. And it's clear that its governing body is not working for college football, which is why I brought this up now. I was originally thinking this might be my August show, as I'm going on vacation for a long time, so I'm getting a lot of stuff. I'll be in Alaska for 3 weeks, so I'm getting a lot of projects done now to make sure that you guys have quality content while I'm gone. Now, there's a disclaimer. The easiest way to say it is this. College football will never be perfect, but we can make College Football Alliance, as I'm calling it, to form a more perfect union, insinuating college football will never be perfect, but we can get closer to that in this. And in this model, I have only gone with the Division 1A FBS school. So that's the 134 that can technically compete for a national championship. Division 1AA, which is the FCS, is not, that's the football championship series. That is all your Division 2 schools or Division 1 schools, sort of double A ball. Division 1A is the ones that can actually compete for bowl games and can compete for a national championship. The easiest way to say this is to say the NCAA is not working. We've seen this now in the settlement with a $2.8 billion settlement in which the NCAA is going to be footing 41% of that, which would be far more, frankly. In my personal opinion, the way I read things and the way I do things. Me personally saying that. It's not as though the NCAA is out there with pitchforks and torches boycotting and trying to destroy good things. But they make nonsensical rules. The issue is this. We are in this quagmire in this. The NCAA is an organization that exists in order to govern college sports and make sure college sports is represented as best as it possibly can. Now, the idea behind the NCAA is a good one. The problem is 75+% of all college sports money comes from, I believe technically it might be 74%, but nonetheless. 3/4 of all college football revenue, or all of college sports revenue, comes from college football. It is what funds athletic departments. It is what does this. It is the reason why outside of the NCAA tournament, it's the only real interesting thing about college sports on a wide basis. You know, there's plenty of people that love college basketball, college baseball, all the like. There's nothing wrong with being a fan of that. If that's what you're a fan of, that's great. But the reality is in this country, when it comes to college sports, college football dominates. But the NCAA tries to take all sports and all athletes and govern the same way, and it can't do that because it just doesn't work. Even if you look at the new settlement deal and how possibly college football can be used in a way in which I believe it's now going to be $20 million can be spent from schools to give directly to money. Inherently, that is part of a Title IX claim. Title IX, which I believe in, is a great thing. Title IX, problem with that is this. If you're looking at revenue sharing, if you are looking at interest, if you are looking at, just general money-making capability and reality, you're going to inherently have athletes being paid more or less than others, even in the same institution, due to the money and interest that they bring. When you recruit a 5-star quarterback into your program, that's going to garner far more national interest and national media attention, such as Texas with Arch Manning. That's going to garner far more media interest than recruiting the best women's gymnast or the best college baseball player or the best softball player for that matter. Doesn't matter. There is almost like 99% more interest based on that because of the popularity of the sport. So they're driving more money to them. They are driving more money from college football than anything else. If you say that Title IX has to impact that, then you have to pay everybody equally, which I'm not inherently against, but then it makes it incredibly difficult to then even fix college football because then either A, we pay everyone the same, which fine, but then schools are going to start cutting different programming to try to increase the ability for them to get higher level athletes in certain sports. That's a very likely possibility, which I do not want to happen, or most people do not want to happen. Or we could go a different route. Escape the NCAA and go for if you are paying athletes, inherently, amateurism is dead. You then can get antitrust exemptions and Title IX exemptions because you're not inherently subject to them, which is probably the best way for college football to do it. They would escape the NCAA model of amateurism and there go that way. Because already I've consulted a legal friend on this matter, who's also a big college football fan, and the future settlements based off of existing antitrust exemptions that the NCAA colleges schools have are problematic because they determine future things without future representation and other stuff. So it's inherently difficult to say what that could do. So the settlement isn't going to work. It's a stopgap measure to get to where it needs to be. So if you really want to go forward, you have to be able to operate in a different realm. The NCAA isn't doing its job in protecting everybody the best way possible. It's starting to feel very witch hunty from a lot of people's perspective, and I understand that, and I agree with that, which is why I am anti-NCAA. The NCAA is a governance body which everyone puts into, but yet it's very strange how it's created and founded by schools. It's supported by schools, but then athletic directors, conference commissioners, things of that matter can go do wildly different things with revenue, with money, with staffing, but they then can't appoint people to committees and do other things. And you may say, well, that's good, then they can't have as much power. But then they can control so much of the benefits of the NCAA, but they can't control the detractors and the governance of the NCAA. So it's a double-edged sword that isn't quite working. So in my opinion, I believe we need to form a college football alliance, which would be something like the college football playoff. So, to show this to you as I go forward here. So, that is the preamble to the United States Constitution that I got to here for you. However, let's see where we're. We're going to go here. How does college sports revenue generating landscape? The schools generate direct revenue from ticket sales, merchandise, donations, and other sources. Schools are organized into athletic conferences that generate their own direct revenue from TV broadcast contracts and tournaments, then distribute money to schools. So the NCAA serves as a governing body making and monitoring rules at the school level, generating its own direct revenue from championship tournaments, distributing the surplus to schools. Bowl games and postseason tournaments are independent entities that generate direct revenue and distribute to conferences and schools. So why is that relevant in this conversation? We're talking NCAA versus the idea of the college football playoff. The college football playoff is not governed or owned by the NCAA. For instance, when we see the NCAA now 68-team tournaments for both men's and women's basketball, that's owned by the NCAA. That's how they have 99.99%, I'm sorry, for screen readers, this way, of all of their revenue is made off of that, essentially. The vast majority of their revenue that funds the NCAA is garnered off the 68 tournament from the NCAA March Madness tournaments of men and women's basketball. They're wildly successful. We all love them. That's great. But they don't own the college football playoff. The college football playoff is owned by the 12 conferences and independently by Notre Dame. All the schools and the conferences have a say into how the college football playoff is run. They have their own self-governance there to determine that. Is that a perfect system? No. However, they have direct control over their destinies and do things. In an odd way, it's a miniature style of the NFL. We all work, we all cooperate, we create this, and we send the 4 best teams to the playoff. Now, next year, that's establishing to 12, and there are already plans to expand to 14. I will get to the playoff again in a later show. However, that model is what possibly should be used, in my opinion, to formulate the College Football Alliance. So as we go forward, we have to say, how do we use this model? We're getting rid of the NCAA as our governance body. We're not going to be a part of the NCAA for this sport. Perhaps it still exists. However, we don't need the National Collegiate Athletic Association anymore for college football. We have the College Football Alliance, which is going to be operated as its governance body with membership fees and overall media revenue sharing. Now, as we go forward, we can go back here to the media deals and how media deals kind of split up into how we do things here. So I'm going to take you here to another useful little tool here on Sportico. So over at Sportico, this is generally the revenue breakdown of U.S. sports leagues. The NFL is probably our best model to use because it's the most successful in the country, but B, beyond and it's most popular, it's our direct comparison because it's the same sport, same interests, and same success rate for the most part of how we govern the sport. So their national revenue breakdown is this. They get 66% of their revenue from national revenue, meaning television deals and that such the like. You get 17% of them is through seating and suites. Team membership sponsorships are worth 10%. Local media is about 1.8%. And then concessions and parking and other things would be 6.6%. Okay. Now, this is how every league breaks down their revenue, of how they garner cash, how they garner money. You're going to naturally assume your local media is going to be higher here because of how many small level schools you will have. So you'd still be able, as a school, to get local media deals to allow for that, and then you may take part of that and throw it into the College Football Alliance as part of its revenue. So the schools would keep the vast majority of the local media revenue, but they'd go from there. But national television deals are what's really going to drive us here. So let's go forward and let's go here to the list of United States over-the-air networks. So it's maybe Wikipedia, but it's a very good, useful thing to see. The vast majority of college football's money comes from television. Broadcast television, almost essentially at this point, is held together by sports and news. You can say there are other shows, and that's not disputing that. However, the vast majority of money and the reason broadcast television can still exist is because of sports and news. So you have NBC, CBS, ABC. They all partner with college football, as does Fox. Fox has Big Noon Saturday, and they have Big Noon football, so you're going to be getting that wonderful Big Ten football. The CW can get involved as well. And technically, you could go with PBS, but no one's going to go with PBS. The other thing about My Network TV, it's owned by Fox, although it's technically its own network. It is a subsidiary of Fox, which is another option. We also have ESPN in this big deal here. Now, again, it may seem like a bit of rambling, but these are all options. We saw that pie chart down that 66% of the NFL's revenue model comes from television marketing deals. That is why I showed that. Those are all possibles and viable partners to get us to a profitable margin at another place for college football. The idea behind the Football Alliance, I'm only giving you money takes right now so you can see how it could operate. We're going to make the vast majority of our revenue from TV and media, but we're also going to get shares of ticket sales, concession sales, parking sales, local media. Could even get boosters involved if you really would like to. Or you could get private donation if you would like to, because you could easily set this up as a non-profit entity as well, such as the National Football League is, which is absurd to say, but technically it's a non-profit. Someone who's worked for a non-profit before, I can tell you, we don't play for the same rules, but nonetheless, that is how it's set up. So here, you have all these different avenues to make money to govern 134 participating schools in college football. Now, how does this fix college football? One, you are self-determining your rules. You can start with conference commissioners and things of that nature, going over and helping aid in the rules process while also giving third-party people who can then get involved as first-party people but have an outside say. So you have outside opinions, outside lawyers, things of that nature who do not have a vested interest in a single conference being successful, and get those third parties to turn into first parties to make the governance fair. Second of all, through revenue sharing splits, let's just pick a number. Let's use the NCAA settlement number. $20 million. I went as low as 10 and then put it in the middle of 15. Each school in the FBS, through revenue sharing, is given $15 million to pay their players. Maybe it could be as low as 10. Maybe you could go lower into 5, 6, what have you. You make it the best reasonable number that you possibly can. But this allows every school from Alabama, Birmingham, all the way up to Alabama. All the way from James Madison, all the way up to Michigan. You have schools that then can start to at least start paying for players a little bit better. And the ironic part is once payments can begin, theoretically, we can start allowing athletes to have better choices to go to different schools. Now, we will obviously always have powerhouses. That's why I said this will never be perfect. College football can never be perfect. But perhaps with a pool of money that we all share and get along with, such as the NFL model, we can start to begin to even the playing field. So smaller schools may be able to grow their athletic programs and their football programs specifically to be better equipped to compete with these larger schools that are certainly seemingly unstoppable. Even with Nick Saban leaving Alabama, Kalen DeBoer is a phenomenal head coach at a college level. Kalen DeBoer is going to make sure Alabama sticks around as a top 10 team. It's not as if George is ever just going to suck with Kirby Smart. George is going to be a top 10 powerhouse pretty much forever now. You have Texas that'll always be here. Ohio State will always be there. Michigan will always be there. You have your powerhouses that are going to stay that way because they have been that way for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 plus years. Sure, they've had down periods, but they all make their way back because they are the institutions of the sport. But allowing that $10, $15, $20 million, whatever the settlement that's agreed upon by the 134 schools of the Alliance, they all put money in based off the revenues that they all get, and they split it evenly to pay players. Simple as that. So already you're looking at, let's see, so you're looking 268. Add a zero to that. You're spending about $2 billion if you did $20 million. So it'd be quite a bit of money to try to establish. However, if you look at the figures and say, there's no way that's possible, think again here, my friends. So we have this over to allow that. So I just gave you a $2 billion figure. That's a lot of money. So maybe it couldn't be $20 million. Be 10. Maybe it could be 5. But at least it's something to allow everyone to compete. If you believe that's ridiculous, there's no way there's that much money into this. Again, my friends, we go over here and look. The Big 12, not even the best football conference, which is losing its powerhouses after this year, just distributed a record $470 million, okay, of revenue distribution. Now, let's keep going into this one. The Big Ten reported revenues of $879.9 million. $852.6 million for the SEC. This was over a fiscal year. ACC, 617 to 707 last year. Pac-12 was dying. dying, and it still made $600 million last year. That is an insane amount of money in a fiscal year to say that you had generated that much revenue. Now you can say, well, that's not all college football. Sure, it's not all college football. Let's go with that story. It's not all college football. How much of that money do you think was generated by college football? Get through, guys. Now, there is some NCAA money in that. I can't deny that. But when you eliminate that partner, and the NCAA makes that money off of basketball, you're still benefiting from that. You're doing those things. You can spread those out to your other schools or to your other school programs. You can do that to other athletic programs. You can take the NCAA's money that you're making because you're still part of the NCAA for other sports, but for college football, you don't need it anymore. You can rely on television deals, ticket sales, concession stands, all that kind of money. You can do all that via alliance. So even if you bring a reasonable amount of money to share, it's worthwhile. Now, schools in this deal could then spend an unlimited amount towards payer payment. Payer payment. Player payment. There it is. Player payment. Now, that inherently institutes, well, how's that any different than what it has been? It's on the up and up. It'll be recorded. And if it's a nonprofit, theoretically, you could also make it public record if you wished. And they're public institutions, the vast majority of them. So you would at least probably have a record of their employees and how they're doing things, which is what the players could possibly be paid as. So you could have a record instead of just going, no, they were never paid back in the day, or now where you have NIL deals that are kind of the Wild West that are making college football better, but also a little bit more unhinged at times as well, because I'm all for players being paid. But the governance is just wild on this one. If you want an idea of how wild it is, go listen to Greg Sankey's last comments. He's the commissioner of the SEC. Go see his latest comments on NIL deals from, I believe, their January meeting. And you tell me whether he believes it's governed properly or not. And say what you will, either though you may be anti-commissioner and anti-college sports commissioning like that, or if you're pro that guy. The guy's clearly smart and knows what the hell he's talking about, knows what he's doing. So no matter what, whether you love it or you hate it, or you love him or you hate him or whatever, there's value in his words. To think about that. But then this allows you to have a more up and up thing, where we can say, all right, we are starting to be able to pay that way. Our ticket sales are going to go up a little bit for a lot of these smaller schools. Why is that? Because they're going to have the opportunity to pay against bigger schools a little bit more. Or television dollars coming their way because they may be on television more often at a higher level than a lower level because they're playing higher level schools. But again, you can still pay an unlimited amount for players. And you can garner that through booster donations, your local media revenue sharing that you get, or whatever share you get of a media deal. There's also digital media deals, and nobody, ironically, because it's sports and it's so broadcast television based or cable television based, no one has really broken into. We've just seen a huge investment from Netflix to get into both the NFL and the WWE, which even if you aren't a huge wrestling fan, you have to say it's kind of sports adjacent. Netflix is now broadcasting sports this year for the National Football League. Amazon, the world's biggest goddamn retailer, they are trying to get more into sports. They already have sports of every kind. You have all these different entities that are getting into streaming as well. So if streaming deals, booster donations, you can make name, image, and likeness deals for the school theoretically, and then pay the players through that. And you can still have NIL deals, but then they can be controlled into those things. There is theoretically a way you could partner with the NCAA to start this, but I wouldn't recommend that because then you're kind of just being stuck to where you were. The only thing that makes this somewhat tricky is the current television deals. I'd have to go look into every conference's specific deal. However, the easiest one to say is this. The college football playoff is currently with ESPN through 2031-32 season. Now, I'm sure there's even larger deals after that. So you'd have to make sure that the new conferences would all have to coincide their television deal ending. So perhaps when you're 2 years short of another conference, you make a 2-year extension. This is all wild speculation, and there's so many legs to this that I can't possibly do it alone. However, these are ideas to help college football. So you'd need to make sure television deals all go forward. You need new scheduling bodies to start, all kinds of things to really get this off the ground and working. However, it would enrich the sport of college football to make it more competitive, more regulated in a realistic way that is fair to player and to institution, and make it worthwhile. And I'm going to pose this to you to tease you with this. We no longer would have 12 conferences, 10 conferences, or whatever the hell it is, and an independent Notre Dame that's not independent, but they are. Whatever. We go here. We're all willingly doing this. So we go to this. We have old conferences and we have new conferences. Our old conferences in name, they may not always be the same teams, but we are going to 6 conferences. The Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC, because we still want our brand recognition there. Those are going to be the conference names that we quote-unquote keep. And then we're going to have 3 new conferences. The Smoky Mountain Conference, the Northeastern Conference, and the Pac West. And to give you a small taste of that, we're going to go here. Big 10, you still have your bigger institutions there. Those big powerhouses that you always see in the Big 10 will still be there. The spirit of the conference will still be there with some slight changes. The Big 12 is going to get souped up. Obviously, you're going to have to absorb some teams, and it will be reinvigorated to be worthwhile. Teams will want to stay in that conference because you're self-governing that way. You can make it so that everyone's happy. The SEC will start garnering perhaps a Florida State, but they'll still have their classic institutions as well. And these new conferences here. We got the NEC, which is really taking care of the northeastern part of the country. Got our Armies and our Navies, our name brands like Penn State and West Virginia, and even more. The Pacific West Conference, which can really take care of, when you look at it, the western third or the western half of the country when it comes to FBS schools. Smoky Mountain Conference, you get your big boys like Clemson, Tennessee, and consistent players such as North Carolina, Louisville, Kentucky. And this is all going to lead, these new conferences are all going to lead into a 16-team new playoff format. I'm going to tease you with that to go forward. That is going to allow, this new college football alliance is going to allow teams to compete with regulated schedules where they don't plan out games 14 years in advance, with regulated schedule makers. Regulated money, which creates a regulated playing field that makes it better for fans, makes it better for players, and frankly, institutions will benefit because on top of that, I'll tell you this, I made our conferences pretty regional based, to be honest with you. But nonetheless, and keep the tradition and the wonderful history of college football alive while making sure it thrives for the next 25, 50 to 100 years going forward to preserve the sport as best we possibly can. That is how we, friends, are going to fix college football. We're going to eliminate the NCAA, and we're going to go to the College Football Alliance, which is based off the idea of self-governance from the college football playoff. But it's not necessarily self-governance because, once again, you're all pooling together to create a new organization which will form rules for everyone that are agreed upon by everybody. Everyone will have a say, and then everyone's bound to them. And people that work for the organization, the College Football Alliance, not the SEC, not the Big Ten, College Football Alliance will then have the responsibilities to make sure all rules and regulations are followed, player treatment is there, institutional treatment is accurate, and everyone has a level playing field. Make sure that the sport, this wonderful sport known as college football, will last for decades upon decades in quality competition, and we ourselves have the blessed Saturday of fun that we asked for. So that is part 1 of 3 of this college football trilogy, starting with the formation of the College Football Alliance to form a more perfect union of college football. Now, if you liked my work today, before I go into my usuals, I got to ask you, my friends, go check out our other stuff. Monday through Friday, we got all kinds of cool stuff over at our YouTube channel. So if you're listening on Spotify, head over to the YouTube channel. If you're on YouTube, you already know here, just make one click and you go see our other stuff. Monday, we get some cool stuff over with some Pokemon variety and Pokemon pack openings. Tuesday, it's the flagship show, the ONETA show. We're talking gaming, we're talking movies, we're talking anything we want to talk about over on the ONETA show. We do have a little bit of football crossovers, quite a frequent bit over at the ONETA show. Wednesday, you got the Pokemon Bliss and Oblivion Project. Thursday, you're already here, you know it. It's the ONETA football show, where I'm giving you genius ideas like the College Football Alliance. And Friday, it's that rotational basis. We got the Adventure Show to plan your next adventure. We got the Brick Builder Show to see some Lego kit builds and have some fun there. We got Pokemon card pack openings again. We got Yu-Gi-Oh card pack openings. We may even have the first tease. You know what? I'll just straight up tell you. First time ever, we're going to try to get into Lorcana. We're going to do a Lorcana pack opening. Will that be good for me? I have no idea. But you can see it there. And I'm also going to ask you this, folks. It would be really helpful if you could go support us here over at Etsy. Go to ptecreative.etsy.com and you can get yourself a world of fun merchandise. Make sure that you get yourself something real nice and good for yourself. Over there at the Etsy shop, we've got a bunch of cool stuff. We got hats, we got stickers, we got t-shirts, we got hoodies. We have our own fashion line. We have stickers for the football fan. We're going to have some more college football merch soon. We're all going to have lots of fun stuff. If you're over there, go buy yourself some wonderful stuff, some wonderful merch, and support PT Creative business model, if you will. It helps me and every person who works and helps me with PTE Creative. Because we're just all artists that want to make cool content for all of our friends and family on the internet, which we love dearly. So, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of 3 of this college football trilogy. Hopefully, we don't have to break this up, but if we get some major football news, college or professional related in the NFL, we may have to break it up, but I'm going to try to make sure we get a week to week one, which is going to be very fun for everybody over there. This has been part 1. If you enjoyed it, like, comment, subscribe, send us a review on Spotify, share this with as many fans as you can. If you think this is a stupid idea, tell me. If you think this is a genius idea and you have a better way to explain it, tell me. We're here to fix college football. It'd be great. Go check out our socials over on TikTok and Instagram as well, and head over to Etsy shop to get yourself some cool merch, because that would be super dope if you could do that. But once again, thank you all so much for listening and watching. It is appreciated. Coming over on the other ONETA show, we got some more Smash Bros. Talk. We got more pack openings on Monday coming, and we're going to have that new Lorcana opening on Friday, and we got new Pokemon on Wednesday. So go check out the rest of our content over on YouTube. It's going to be fun for you, and enjoy it. That has been this episode of the ONETA Football Show. I am your host, Evan Davies, signing out from PTE Creative. Peace, love, and hugs to everyone on the internet for a blissful Saturday of college football eventually. Peace. What is up, fellow football fans of the internet, and welcome back to another edition of the ONETA Show, brought to you by PTE Creative. Apparently that's my signature now. And welcome to part two of our Time to Fix College Football series, in which today we're going to be going over this. New college football conferences. Are they bad? Are they good? We're going to figure out that right here and now. Now, as we go back. Last time on the show, or last time in this series, just in case we've been interrupted, I'm recording it all in one big session to make sure all my thoughts are coherent and cohesive, so to speak. But the last time on the college football series that we were doing, we went over the formation of what should be collectively called the College Football Alliance, which would be a self-governance body created by the 134 FBS schools that are eligible to win a Division I national championship. Now, there's a lot of things that go into that. There's a lot of pieces that go into making that happen. But let's say that happens. It involves then college football conference realignment. We are seeing at an exorbitant rate conferences change in the blink of an eye. We already saw the crumbling of the Pac-12. And now the Pac-12 has 2 teams left, which are now going to be forced to join another conference. Colorado's bailed and they're going to the Big 12. USC, Oregon, Washington, these kinds of guys, they're going over to the Big 10. And now you have the Big 10, a conference that truly spans coast to coast. Where theoretically you will have games eventually where Rutgers, which is in New Jersey, is going to be playing USC, which is in California. And you may say, well, what's the big deal? Well, this is still under the false guise of amateurism, not amateurism. Now, we just got the NCAA settlement as well. Or the announcement of the NCAA settlement. It's not fully agreed upon. However, and there in line you have this very fun and interesting idea that college students that are supposed to be student, quote-unquote, athletes are going to be traversing major parts of the country on a weekly basis while also still actively being quality students. This happens in the National Football League, but those guys are all post-college. They're paid professionals and paid handsomely for that fee. But also, when you really look at it, at least 1/3 of their schedule is geographically located where it's easy to travel to and from. That is part because this country is so goddamn large. You have to be smart about that. That's part of the reason college football, the rivalries, you don't see Alabama have a rivalry with Washington. When the hell was Alabama ever playing Washington? Outside of college football playoffs occasionally or things of that nature. Random occurrences in a bowl game, which are specialty games. When did you see stuff like that? You didn't until the last 5-10 years of explosion where you're getting teams to go coast to coast now, and it's going to get even worse. There are huge swaths of the country that it makes it near impossible. Now, Is there ever a way to be perfect? No, there isn't. We have two major mountain ranges that make it difficult to do. We have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of miles between schools at times in their conferences. And that's understandable. It's never going to be perfect. However, if you want to make sure that you protect both the integrity of the sport, the competitiveness of the sport, and still make it so that these athletes can still be students of some kind. Now, I went over it last time. They'll be paid in this. I'm not for amateurism. I believe that they should be paid for their efforts because they are making bank for that school that they are playing for and getting nothing for it until now with NIL deals and things of that nature. But not everyone's getting paid. Now, in this theory, everyone would be paid for them. But let's move forward here, guys. College football needs to get back to a geographical model. However, I have taken into account there are powerhouse schools everywhere. So the model that I'm proposing has powerhouse schools in each conference, and we are creating six conferences, some of which already pre-exist with slight variations and changes, or big variations and changes by some of them. And then we allow that for each conference to have a division. 2 divisions for that matter. So then that way, the division model actually makes sense and works. You can say, oh, well, it's not really working in the Big Ten. It's just Iowa or occasionally Wisconsin or Minnesota sneaks in. On the Western Division, it's always Ohio State or Michigan winning. Maybe Penn State has a run at it. You can say that all you want, but in a more competitive model, we're going to see schools be able to rise up. And that will make worthwhile competition. So that is how we are going to introduce our new conferences. So like I said here, we have old conferences and we have new conferences. I touched on this last time on the show, that we have the Big Ten in name will still be a conference. The Big 12 will still be a conference. Although the Big 12, in my opinion, is of the Power 5 conferences the weakest, because I'm not counting the Pac-12 anymore, because let's be honest, the Pac-12 doesn't exist. So if you really look at the next big thing, in my opinion, the weakest conference usually, and the most that's just been dominated by 2 schools, is the Big 12. But the Big 12 is going to re-exist in a different format. The SEC, most dominant conference of all, we still want that for its brand recognition. So you can see already the pockets of geography we're covering with those conferences. But then we have the Smoky Mountain Conference, the Northeastern Conference, the NEC, and the Pac-West Conference, which will be known as the PWC. But that Pacific West Conference will be a part of it. So you can see the pockets that we are creating for college football. So we go here, we'll start with the Big Ten. So I have covered every single school. Before I even get to the Big Ten, I'll say it again. 134 FBS schools. I did not go this for FCS or lower, because that's a lot. It's just a lot to do. But this is a project that I've worked on for a year, even before this podcast existed, because I want college football to make sense. I say what you will about the NFL. The NFL makes sense. There's very few things in the NFL that you're like, what? Why? There's 8 divisions with 4 teams in each one. There's 4 divisions in each conference. The conference winners play each other in a championship game. That was the whole idea behind this model. How do we make it make sense? How do we go forward and make that make sense? So this is where we are going to go, and we'll start with the Big Ten. So I'm going to cover every single school and highlight some big things about each conference that I found very valuable and important to include. So here we go. As we go from our old conference and new conferences, the Big Ten, you have your stalwarts, your Michigans, Ohio States, Iowas, And then I put 5 schools on each one. So I put my beloved Wisconsin Badgers and Minnesota on there as well. You're seeing Penn State not a part of that. That is very, very strategic. So I'm going to take you here. And unfortunately, it's just an Excel sheet, but that's A-okay because it gets our point across. We go to the Big Ten Conference. We have a total of 22 teams. I have another note for you. But in the Eastern Division, you have Ball State, Bowling Green, Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Indiana, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Purdue, Toledo, and Western Michigan. So you can see we're heavily focused on just a few states, even in that division. You have Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois. Nope, not Illinois. What am I talking about here? So you have just Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio in that division. Pretty damn good in my opinion. Allows for that travel to be far more local. It gets back to the magic of college football, which is regional, which is that beautiful regional pride and regional rivalries, and allows each division to compete now because we now have that pool of money for every school to spend on players. So perhaps a local kid from, let's say, Central Michigan, which has a decent football program, but it can't compete with Michigan or Michigan State even, or Ohio State. Maybe now they'll go, hey, I'm still going to be paid and I can stay local. I can stay around my family. And I'm going to make Central Michigan a big thing. They'll play there now. You're going to see a trend. Every division in every conference has a few stalwarts to make sure every division has a ratings draw or a ratings appeal. So in the Big Ten East, you still have Michigan. You still have Ohio State. Michigan State can still get ratings. Indiana can still get ratings. Purdue can still get that in part. And then schools like Toledo that have a few interesting players that can compete for a little bit can start getting brought up. Bowling Green, Ball State. Those were all schools that made small runs in the top 25s in my lifetime. That now they can start being a part of that in a little bit bigger way. And in the Western Division, you have Illinois, Iowa, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, Northern Illinois, Northwestern, and Wisconsin, which is my future home. I'm going to be living in Madtown, so I think my apartment is going to be 5 to 10 minutes away from Camp Randall, which can be pretty rad. Not to give you too many details. That's a pretty wide radius still. Don't try and find me. But if you ever want to meet up for a coffee and a drink, let me know. If you're in Madison, we can talk about football. But again, you look at that Western Division, it's a little bit more expansive because once you get to the middle of the country, it's kind of a no man's land for schools to have a lot of variance to be able to play other schools. And I wanted to make sure that we housed classic rivalries and regional varieties. Now, I know that Nebraska itself is far closer to Colorado. But you can't justify in a geographic model Colorado and Ohio State as much in a regional model. And so we had to make some cuts to allow for that. And this is a realistic thing. The Big Ten is going to be a very powerful conference because it always has been. So going into this, they're going to want to make sure that they're taken care of. So then you pick up quality schools like Missouri and like Kansas. The other reason you do that is if we go back here to our rosters of division, in the Western Division, you pick up players like Kansas, Missouri, who was in a top 10 school last year, Nebraska, which is making its way back up. So that Western Division, now in my lifetime, Nebraska was a national powerhouse. And although, yeah, I'm almost 32 years old, that's not like we're saying, oh, God, Fordham back in the 30s. We're not talking about a school like that. We're talking about a school that has a quality coach and the program is getting better. So in the Western Division, we're going to have real competition for the Eastern Division with those two stalwarts in Michigan and Ohio State and those other schools that are going to rise up and to compete. The only note I had about this, geographically, Notre Dame makes perfect sense for the Big Ten. It fits the ethos of the Big Ten. If you said in current college football with their college alignments, if you said which conference Notre Dame actually belongs in, I would tell you it belongs in the Big Ten. And that's not even from my bias of being a Big Ten guy or a Big Ten kid growing up in that area. Their style of football fits that style of play. It allows for that region to shine even more. However, you can see the note. It was moved to the NEC, and I will get to that in a little bit. But as we all know, the Big Ten and Big Ten conference play will always be high quality stuff. Now, as we continue, we're going to go to the rest of our existing conferences. So from the Big Ten, we go down south to the Big 12, starting to get a little bit southwestern here. Now you can see some of those stalwart schools, the Texases, Oklahomas, but then the Baylors, the Arkansas, the Texas A&Ms. But I threw a last minute in one as well. So as we go here, we're now going to go over to the Big 12 and its rosters. So we have the Eastern Division and the Western Division as well here. So the Eastern Division of the Big 12, it's slightly chaotic because you have really just a circle. So East and West may not be the best describers. You could make color names up for them. You could make fun names up for them. Whatever could be interesting. Why is Texas not? Oh, Texas State. Huh. I may have screwed that up. Texas is in this conference, and I'm also seeing a typo. So let's have some fun with that one. So we are here to say this. That Texas belongs here. This was just a typo. That's why I took Texas twice. My apologies. You're seeing technical difficulties immediately with this one. But that's A-okay. That's supposed to be Texas. So we have 23 total teams. In the Eastern Division, we have Arkansas, Arkansas State, Louisiana, Louisiana Monroe. A controversial one is LSU, Louisiana State. Louisiana Tech, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Sam Houston, Southern Methodist, which is SMU, Texas A&M, and Tulsa. I'll go into Western Division, and then I'll start describing some of the reasons we did this one. In the Western Division, you have Baylor, Houston, New Mexico State, North Texas, Rice, Texas, Texas Christian, Texas State, Texas Tech, Texas El Paso, which is UTEP, Texas San Antonio, which is UTSA. So you can see here, we've automatically already divided Oklahoma and Texas. So each division has their classic stalwart in it. But the Eastern Division picks up Arkansas, it picks up LSU, and Oklahoma State. So you have some real powerhouses there, and a Texas A&M. The Western Division, you have Baylor, which is still a competitive program, Houston, which has been rising up lately, TCU, which has always been making a push in the last 20 years to be quality, Texas Tech is still there, UTEP and UTSA can still compete, and you have those other schools there that can rise up, get a little bit better with that competitive money play. Now, the biggest controversy that it probably would exist here is LSU is an SEC staple, at least in my lifetime. However, I felt that the Big 12, along with the Northeastern Conference, the NEC, which has already been detailed in our last podcast, I felt that those schools, or these conferences specifically, lacked just one more, they needed one more stalwart. They needed that ratings draw to make sure every conference feels relevant right off the bat. Through time, some of these lower level schools, quote unquote, these smaller schools, can start to rise up and get better because they can start getting more pay involved with their players because we have more equal playing field payment-wise. And then on top of that, if they're starting to get competitive because they get better players, they'll get better coaches, the whole thing will rise up, theoretically speaking. So here you get that Big 12 conference. I felt that the Big 12 just needed that one extra school, so I gave Louisiana State, which is LSU, over to the Eastern Division of the Big 12. But you can still have the Red River rivalry game. Now here I think is a really good reason to show this here. In division, theoretically, each college football team, if you start roughly about August 15th, which you don't have to start that early technically, but to avoid as much as the NFL as possible to get those bigger games early. One of the cool parts about starting that early is you can really get a 12-game session in while still being able to respect a student-athlete's schedule, geographically speaking, and it allows for this. In this model, in my opinion, once we have a governance body that's very worthwhile, you can do this. Inside of your division of your conference, you have to play 6 games. Then you have 4 interconference games, which then allows for those classic rivalries to still exist even if they're split up. I heavily looking back at the Big Ten, really tried to split up Ohio State and Michigan. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And it wasn't because, I hate both those programs. Not like that at all. I have respect for both those programs. However, I will never root for Ohio State because Ohio State's disgusting. However, beyond that clear bias that I just showed, you can't say that they're not quality schools and quality programs. But it just made no sense geographically to split them up, especially when the Western Division of the Big Ten got so much bigger. With Missouri, with Kansas, with Nebraska. So here you had the ability with 6 division games, you play with 6 teams within your division as best you possibly can. And it may not be perfect, but you say we're trying to aim for 6 games. Then you have 4 games interconference, so you guarantee the Red River rivalry will always happen. You just know Texas and Oklahoma, that is a regional special, and that is a tradition that needs to be respected. So you do that. And then you get 2 out-of-conference games. I thought about toying with a 10-game season or an 11-game season, but this is a television product that we have to pay for these players. So we're going with 12 games. That is where I will be realistic and say this is a television product, and we have to be smart about it. Nonetheless, then you can see Texas and Oklahoma can still play each other, and then they still can attract that big game or two from an out-of-conference opponent. You can have a Big 10 and Big 12 conference game, and you can have rotational bases just like the NFL does, in which perhaps the Big 12 in, let's say, 2025 plays the Big 10. And you can do it seeding-wise. And then it's never going to be perfect because with 134 teams divided by 6, you're not going to get a great number. But nonetheless, we also do this geographical, so not every conference is perfectly numbered with each other, but it's still a very good balanced system and allows for fun things. I'm also shooting on the fence a little bit, but it's fun. Now we go toward the most notorious of them all, the most dominant conference. We go to the SEC. So the biggest one you're going to see is an addition right now at Florida State. The Seminoles are going to come play in the SEC. But let's get to the real nitty-gritty of it in the SEC, that Southeastern Conference. So as we go to the SEC rosters, we again have the Eastern and Western divisions. You could call it slightly something different, but it just worked for this one really well. The SEC is still a dominant conference with name brand schools. So Eastern Division, Central Florida, Florida Atlantic, Florida International, Florida State, Georgia State, Georgia Southern, Jacksonville State, Miami, Florida now becomes part of the SEC, South Florida. So you're picking up some really quality schools from different conferences that can make Real big runs. Then Western Division, your stalwart, Alabama. Alabama Birmingham, which is UAB. Auburn. Georgia Tech. Mississippi, which is known better as Ole Miss in college football. Mississippi State, South Alabama, Southern Mississippi, Troy, and Tulane. You have 21 total teams here. We moved in what could be a controversy here, LSU to the Big 12 to make sure the Big 12 was strengthened as much as possible. But you look at the SEC. Look at the schools with immense college football history in Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Miami, Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. I just named 8 schools with an enormously rich winning history in college football. And again, these divisions allow everybody to have a little bit more of a regional flair, allow for smaller travel times, better for the players, less travel, less wear and tear on the body. But you still get these stalwart schools, which is tremendous in this. Now, the SEC, it's pretty straightforward, but you pick up some of those smaller schools that you've lost in that region. And you pick up some really quality schools. The state of Florida, it is flabbergasting how many Division I FBS schools are in the state of Florida. It's insane. But the state of Florida can then really become a hotbed. Florida and Georgia essentially are their own division in this, which is really fun and interesting to look at. Then we get to the new stuff, the ones that are going to really start breaking this up into our 6 conferences that are extremely worthwhile to have. In our next conference, we're going to start with the NEC, the Northeastern Conference. Now, the Northeastern Conference, arguably, in my mind, could have been the most lackluster. It was flabbergasting to me. I should go back to my face for this one. It was flabbergasting to me seeing how the foundational pieces of football, when you look at early college football, the Armies, the Navies, Fordham, those foundational schools that really started making, and then you look at the Princetons and the other schools of that nature, they're all East Coast schools. You know, it's wild to say how much college football history is embedded in the Northeast, but when you look at the Northeast itself and college football powerhouses, they're not there. They're just not, which is wild to say. So we had to do a little bit of play here to make sure that the Northeast had a worthwhile conference with stalwarts that could compete on a national level when you get into a college football playoff scenario. And that is why I made what could be a controversial decision to throw another team over at the NEC. So let's go back. The NEC, you have your name brands, your Armies, your Navies, West Virginia, Penn State, and Pittsburgh. Or Pitt, if you. But here's your Northeastern Conference in totality. You have your Western Division. Akron, James Madison, Liberty, Marshall, Maryland, Navy, Ohio, Old Dominion, Pittsburgh, Virginia, and West Virginia. It's a quality conference right there with competitive play. Maryland can still be a player there. Pitt is a player. West Virginia is a player. And Virginia and James Madison are very good schools at college football right now. Liberty, also high-quality school there. Now, we may say, oh, but that's not the same level of play. It's going to start balancing out. So we're going to start playing at that level, guys. Then in the Eastern Division, Army, Boston College, Buffalo, UConn, Kent State, UMass, Notre Dame, Penn State, Rutgers, Syracuse, Temple. So again, the most controversial thing here was, even though they're in Indiana, and I believe that the folk of South Bend would probably even tell you this, that if they belonged in a conference, they belong in the Big Ten. However, if you look at this roster of the NEC, I don't think it's very much within logic and reason that this could be the weakest conference. They needed another real player to make them both nationally relevant and nationally competitive to be able to be more of a fixture. The other thing which is ironic is me making this move. Theoretically, it could appease the independent nature of Notre Dame, where they go to a conference that is quote unquote weaker. They may be able to dominate early on and become far more nationally relevant even more now that they're in a conference because they're constantly playing in deeper playoff runs to start, which is hilarious to think about that could be the case. But that is the Northeastern Conference. Now, the West and East terms, they're not great. We could probably argue that, it should be different names, but it was just it's kind of how things fit. Notre Dame is the one that makes really no sense on an Eastern division, so to speak, but I try to make as much make sense as possible. And again, look at my face. I'm trying here, folks. I'm trying to just make it make sense. That's what we want from college football. We're trying to make it make sense. So let's go to our next conference, friends, and we go from the NEC from one coast. Let's go to the other. Let's go to the Pac West, or the Pacific West Conference. So you have your stalwarts, Utahs, your Washingtons, your USCs, Oregons, Arizona. These are all really high-quality schools when it comes to college football. But let's really take it in depth. The Pacific West Conference is the biggest conference with 25 schools. And really, when you look at it, it is a shame now. It's a total shame that the Pac-12 has gone away because it was just reinvigorated itself as possibly the best, one of if not the best and most competitive conference in college football. Washington State, Oregon, all were highly, highly competitive and were vying for a championship. USC is always in that mix because they're USC. They were in a down year this year, but they were at least still a highly relevant school. Oregon State was still highly relevant. So this is a big-time conference. It's a shame that the Pac-12 has gone away just because of the way college football business has been handled. So we're trying to fix that. So here we got our own custom divisions with the Mountain Division and the Coastal Division. So here you can see in the Mountain Division, Air Force, Arizona State, Boise State, Brigham Young, which is BYU, Colorado State, Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV, New Mexico, Utah State, Wyoming. Again, stalwarts, Arizona, old-time favorite that's trying to be revitalized in Colorado. Utah, three big schools right there that are always in the mix. Arizona State has a history that they're trying to reinvigorate. Air Force could possibly get in the mix if they could get it together. New Mexico even. Wyoming could make a push for some fun stuff, especially if they keep recruiting quality players like Josh Allen coming out of there. Then you go to the Coastal Division. You get Cal Los Angeles, also known as UCLA, Fresno State, Hawaii, Nevada, Oregon State, San Diego State, San Jose State, Stanford, Southern California, USC, Washington, and Washington State. Think about that, man. That is such high quality football in each division. And that Coastal Division, I think it has to be argued, if you were looking at modern football, that's the best division in college football. With Oregon State, Stanford, but recently they've taken a dip. They can get better. USC, Washington, and Washington State. Those are some heavy hitters. You also got to put into play, UCLA has been competitive in the last couple of years too. So the biggest thing about the Pac West, One, you're revitalizing the fact that you want to invest college football across the country. We need to show that western side of the country it is valued from a FBS standpoint. Number one. Number two, geographically, the biggest pain in the ass conference, if you want to say geographically, is the Pac West, which is why I divided it the way I did. It's literally just the three states on on the continental US and Hawaii, because Hawaii is a Division 1 school. Like, it's literally just states in those three states. It's just schools in those three states because it's such a pain in the ass geographically, because then you have schools throughout Wyoming, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada. That's big, wide open territory, man. But it still limits their travel, and plane travel will still be very successful there in short time with shorter wear and tear on our players. So again, better for the players. Geographical rivalry still exists. And what's very, very cool about this is then it invigorates new rivalries in that mountain division to a degree, but we still allow for interconference play or interdivisional play, which is really fun to see in the Pacific West. And finally, our final conference to get to here, folks. Possibly my favorite name, the Smoky Mountain Conference. Just because I'm a huge wrestling fan and I love the history of the Smoky Mountain Wrestling territory. Then we go to the Smoky Mountain. We pick up some heavy hitters from the ACC and Clemson. A few other schools. But then we got Kentucky, Tennessee, Louisville, North Carolina. Your stalwarts, so to speak. Let's go back. Let's see that full roster. We got an Eastern Division and a Western Division. Eastern Division, Charlotte, Clemson, Coastal Carolina, Duke, East Carolina, North Carolina State, South Carolina, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. We're here at a 20-team total, so this is perfect 10-10 divisions. But look at that. Clemson, North Carolina State, or NC State, South Carolina, 4 big-time schools, plus Virginia Tech. Wake can be competitive from time to time. You're getting some competitive good juices flowing in that Eastern Division right away. And with Clemson not being exactly perfect like they were the past couple of years, under the Trevor Lawrence, Dabo Swinney, Deshaun Watson days, that's getting real competitive right there in that Eastern Division. Then you look at that Western Division. App State finally getting to play with the big boys a little bit more often. So you get to play App State, Cincinnati, another controversial one possibly. But I thought of it this way. They're the closest school to this division, and when you're really breaking up name brand, there was another good name brand that could fill out this Western Division. That could be a controversial one. But the Western Division, again, App State, Cincinnati, Kentucky, Louisville, Memphis, Miami, Ohio, Middle Tennessee State, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Western Kentucky. So you still have Cincinnati, Kentucky, Louisville, Tennessee. And there's some other schools that can be worthwhile and competitive in there. So again, these are competitive divisions. Outside of the Big Ten and the SEC, what's most ironic, the reason we may know those schools to be so much better in the SEC is because if you actually look at the competition around them, just around them geographically, it's not nearly as worthwhile. Whereas if you break up this way, geographically, the other reason I wanted to do this was because there's real good competitive nature in a lot of these geographical breakdowns. But think about that. The Carolinas are just going to eat themselves alive with those 4 schools, plus a little bit more. The Western Division, Kentucky and Tennessee are just going to try to eat each other alive with all the schools in that state, or in those states. And then you got a little bit of Ohio and a little bit of North Carolina sniping in there too. But they're really worthwhile geographical competitiveness, which allows you to have better overall play everywhere. So you may say, no, the tippy top, it's going down a little bit, but it's not. Because you're still going to have these very high-quality matchups every week. You're not going to notice that. But you're going to notice that, holy shit, man, that Smoky Mountain Conference is pretty competitive. It's pretty fun to watch. Whoa, that Pacific West Conference, that's goddamn. It's a lot of stuff going on that Western Seaboard. Jesus Christ, cool shit's happening. So that's what you want to do. And it all leads you to this. All leads to this final thing here. A new playoff format, which we are going to be talking about next week on the show in our next episode. But we have a new 16-team playoff structure, which is logical, makes sense, and still allows for the classic bowl game series that college football fans love at the end of their calendar years. But that is going to make for much better college football under the College Football Alliance. Wonderful, wonderful method of doing college football, in my opinion. Now, if you love this opinion, you're like, oh God, he should be a rewarder because he's a genius. He's a genius, I tell you. A genius. Well, I gotta ask you something, man. If you'd like to reward me, which I would love to be rewarded, man, head over to Etsy shop. Go to ptecreative.etsy.com and go check it out. We got a lot of cool merchandise that fulfills a lot of cool stuff. A lot of niches that we're part of, niches, if you will. That's part of our channel. We got Pokemon stuff. We got stickers for national parks. We got our own fashion line with the Hate to See It line. We got Harry Potter stuff. We got Power Ranger stuff. We got all kinds of cool stuff. But we got our football stuff too. Don't you worry. We're going to be building it out even more with even more college football stuff, man. But some highly reviewed products for a lot of good fun. And get some good merchandise. We have hats. We have hoodies. We have t-shirts. We have stickers. We're going to have even more merchandise soon. So go check out ptecreative.etsy.com and help your boy out. I'm an artist that's just trying to make sure that I can make the world a better place through my art. Now, you may say, hard for me to part with $1. I'm liking that free entertainment. I understand that. So I have more for you. Instead of going to ptecreative.etsy.com, but you should, because it's really cool and you'll get cool stuff. But maybe you don't want to do that. That's fine. Monday through Friday, we have new programming here on PT Creative all the time. Monday, new Pokemon card pack openings. I love getting that nerdy insight everywhere. Tuesday, it's the flagship ONETA show. We've done crossovers between football and that before, but we also talk gaming. We talk about movies. We talk about all kinds of cool stuff over at the ONETA show. Wednesday, we're getting back into Pokemon with new Fakemon with the Pokemon Bliss and Oblivion project. Thursday, you're already here. You already know it. You already love it. It's the ONETA football show. And Friday, we got that rotational basis. We have the adventure show to plan your next natural adventure around there. Or the ONETA Brick Builder show where we're going to be building some Lego kits and sharing some really cool stuff off of that. Or we can get more Pokemon card pack openings. We just did the Lorcana pack opening for the first time, Disney's Lorcana. We do Yu-Gi-Oh card openings, and we also do a bunch of other specialty programming that comes out on Fridays. It's all rotational, and it's a lot of fun. So go check out the rest of our content over on YouTube. That is going to do it. That's going to be it for this show over this week. Now, if you like the show, please like, comment, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, leave us a review. Not YouTube. If you're on Spotify, leave us a review. It'd be really cool if you did that. But like, comment, subscribe over on YouTube. Share this with as many people as possible on any format you wish. Go check out our socials over on TikTok and Instagram. A lot of cool, fun stuff over there as well. And go check out the Etsy shop. I've already said go to ptecreative.etsy.com. But that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for watching, football fans, for this part 2. We got one more part on how to fix college football, and we're getting into the college football playoff format. It's going to be fun. Trust me, it's going to be a lot of fun when you see this kind of stuff. So be sure to catch part 3. Catch part 3 over at PTE Creative. I'm your host, Evan Davies. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Peace. What is up, fellow football fans, and welcome back to another edition of the ONETA Football Show, brought to you by PTE Creative. As always, I'm your host, Evan Davies. Today, we are talking something very specific here. It's part of our 3-part series on how to fix college football. And it's a new college football playoff structure. And it is going to be fun, let me tell you. I'll give you a little sneak peek on how things are going to be working, just like that. Before we go into everything, I think it's really important to see our current structure. Now, I said this is a 3-part series. If you haven't caught the other episodes, which I highly recommend you do because it's going to give you a lot of context as to why I'm doing the thing. This is all part of the Time to Fix college football series. So, episode 1 was establishing the College Football Alliance, which is an idea I created in which college football, via their schools, create a self-governance body for college football to really just make sure college football in and of itself is successful and lasts for as long as possible. That's the whole point. With that being said, we have all new conferences then, all new levels of competition with paid players for every single team across FBS, starting with the same pool of money, which is really, really cool and important to say. College football, in and of itself, is hindered because it has an inconsistent governing body with the NCAA that doesn't really befit the sport anymore. The NCAA may be successful at protecting other sports, but not necessarily college football very well, especially since college football is the driver between 3/4 of the money of college sports. Now, with that being said, we needed a governing body. That's why we created the College Football Alliance. But the college football playoff in its current existence is actually part of the inspiration as to why I thought a college football alliance or a governing body created by the schools can work. College football playoffs are not owned by the NCAA. It's not like the NCAA tournament where they host it, they make the money, and those 68 schools on both the men's and women's side in March are successful, and then the majority of the money goes to the NCAA and then is filtered through them. The college football playoff structure is actually owned by every college football conference in Notre Dame. So every school has a say in it, theoretically. In its current format, well, in its last use format, because we are transitioning to a new one, technically, it was a 4-team playoff with 4 at-large bids. With pretty much your guarantee was the Big Ten champion was getting in, the SEC championship was getting in, and then 2 schools that people thought deserved to get in would get in. And it was based off the quality of a conference most of the time. That's the reason we saw Washington there this year. And then Texas, because they beat Alabama, who was the SEC champion, Texas deserved to get in. It was a logical way, but you're breaking down 134 teams. You're trying to make sure it works, and you only have 4 at-large bids. So not every conference championship game matters. You could theoretically lose a conference championship game and still get in that system. It doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense because you only have 4. We're now going to a system of 12 at-large bids. So you can say, oh, the championship game will matter a little bit more. That's theoretically true, but not for every conference. Not every conference's championship game is going to matter. Some smaller schools that usually don't get a chance will get that in a 12 at-large system. But what I'm proposing is a 16-game system with coherence because there's only 6 conferences in the college football. So I'm going to go over a little quick preview of that again. It's recap from the last show, but we're going to go through it quickly. So to get to this new format of college football, the college football playoff, you have to get new conferences and old conferences meshed together into 6 coherent conferences. You have your Big Ten, which is pretty much its staples from back in the day, with very few changes. But Michigan, Ohio State, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, they're all still there. But they pick up Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. Quality stuff. We go to the next one. The Big 12 will start there. You still have Texas, Oklahoma, Baylor, Texas A&M, Arkansas. They also pick up LSU. Texas Tech is still in there. They're quality programs over in the Big 12. to make it a very worthwhile thing. Oklahoma State's still in that preview as well. The last existing conference, you still have the two national powerhouses of Alabama and Georgia. But you get Ole Miss, you get Florida, you pick up Florida State, you pick up Miami, Florida. Pick up a lot of good programs in the SEC under its current ruling. So even though they lose an LSU to the Big 12, they gain some with Florida State, Miami, some quality programs. Then we got our new conferences. The Northeastern Conference. And a lot of these schools that are listed here, you see here, you may say, well, Penn State's the only one that's really worthwhile. Well, West Virginia can make a run. Pitt could make a run. Army and Navy, they're here for name brand here, but they also pick up Notre Dame. Maryland has been competitive. Rutgers has been competitive. So you get some quality play there in that new conference. Then what could be considered the best conference with 25 total teams is the Pacific West. Utah, Washington, Oregon, USC, Arizona. Oregon State is still there. Arizona State's still there. Colorado. And a lot of high-quality, smaller schools that are still in play there. Cal, UCLA, big-time teams. And then the final of the new conference, the Smoky Mountain, which is sneaky competitive. Clemson, Louisville, Kentucky, North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina. A lot of quality little schools in there. And by little, I don't mean belittle. Just out of nowhere. Nice little guy coming through. Powerhouse to get through. That all leads to this. A new college football playoff structure. So here's your biggest thing right off the bat. I'll keep the graphic up and take it down from time to time. Take a good look at that. We have 16 teams. And take a look at the teams, because there's a bigger variance in there than you'd think. But we go through. The biggest thing I wanted to fix was it matters. Every game matters now. You can always say, well, every game matters. Does it? Florida State went 12-0 last year. They didn't even get a chance to play for the playoff because most people just said, well, they lost their quarterback, so it doesn't matter. They had a perfect season. They didn't get to play. Is that fair? In this system, it works. That team gets in. Every game still matters. Your divisions matter. Your conference matters. Your biggest thing in here is this. If we recall, I'll give you an example here. Every single conference has been divided into two divisions, which means in late November, early December, or you could even do it early November. I personally would put it the weekend before Thanksgiving. You know the NFL is going to dominate Thanksgiving, so play the weekend before Thanksgiving and start a new tradition for yourselves. Your conference championship game becomes eminently important. Those two teams are playing for higher seeding in a tournament of 16 teams. But what's super cool is you won your division. You should be rewarded. You'll still have an opportunity to win and prove your mettle against other teams, but your seeding won't be as high. So theoretically, you're going to have a harder time going forward and playing the playoff and winning the national championship game. Plus, as you already saw, we only have 6 divisions and we have 16 teams. How does that break down? Every conference winner gets in. Every conference loser has a chance still. And by loser, they still won their division. So, there's still a top 12 team theoretically in the country. And we still have 4 at-large bids to make sure we still represent college football the best possible with high-quality teams. So it balances out maybe if a conference isn't so hot one year and we have 2 teams that maybe, I don't know, maybe they shouldn't be there. We're still going to get 4 high-quality teams. And if you can't finish with either a division win, a conference win, or you're one of the 4 best teams divided by the AP poll and the coaching poll. I just took the AP poll for an example here. If you can't be one of those teams, you don't deserve a chance at the national championship. But here you actually can make that claim accurately. Whereas last year, you had high quality teams. Georgia didn't get a chance to play. Florida State didn't get a chance to play. Oregon didn't get a chance to play. You can say, well, they didn't win. I understand that. But they're still high quality teams. Now you allow yourself that every game matters because it gives you better opportunity and better seeding. However, you still have a chance, even if you falter, to make it and still prove that you're the best in the game. It's based off the NFL model as best as that possibly can be done here, which is why we can go to the tournament now of itself. We go to the playoff itself. So here's the most important part. The teams included, I included this from the 2023 polling done to determine the top 25 of college football right before the college playoff was taken. What teams got in, what teams deserve to get in. So that's what determines seeding here. So it was obvious last year Michigan was the top team. They deserve the number 1 seed. But what's very cool about this format and why I love this format so much, if you look at this programming here, you see this. The 1 through 6 seed would be what would be college conference winners from their previous season. So Michigan would have been the Big Ten winner. Washington was the Pacific West winner, if these conferences still existed. Texas would have been the Big 12 winner. Alabama, the SEC winner. Penn State theoretically would have been the Northeast Coast winner. Not the Northeastern Conference winner. And Louisville, being the highest placed of the Smoky Mountain Conference at the time, they would have been the 6th seed. So already you have 5 mainstays and a slightly outside the wall pick because they did the best of their conference. But they would have been the conference winner based off of polling. Now you could say maybe they wouldn't have won the game. That's fine because you'd have different wins, but I'm just taking it to give an example. So theoretically, your 6 conference winners last year get, from last year, this is how you'd formulate it. So the conference winners, determining they're the best team in each conference, get the top 6 seeds. Then you go to the next tier down. Your conference loser, so to speak, which is such a poor term for it. They're the second best team in the conference. They faltered in probably a high-quality championship game against a great opponent. But they still won one of the 12 divisions in college football, so they still need to be represented here. So for your 7 through 12 seeds, you have conference championship game losers. So this wouldn't be fair because they didn't lose any games last year. But in terms of seeding where they were at the time, you have the conference bid of Florida State. Now, the other thing that's really cool about this is you could do it straight 7 through 12, conference losers do it. But instead, what I did was take the AP poll that was available to me at the time and created this playoff format. So, not only do we guarantee that the division winners get in, but then we take into account quality of play based on the coaches poll and the AP poll. So, as the best team that wasn't a conference winner based off of the new alignment and the results of last year, Florida State gets the 7th seed. Georgia, with only 1 loss, still gets a great at-large bid at the 8th seed. Then you have a really interesting matchup here. Ohio State gets a 9 seed because they lost the Big Ten championship game. Or I'm sorry, they lost. Yeah. They lost the championship game and they lost the one in the big house. 10 seed, Oregon. Pac-12 loser last year, but they were still a powerhouse. They were still a top 5 school for most of the country, or for most of the season. At large bid, they get the 10 seed. 11 seed, Missouri. Here, because of the seeding, I believe they were the number 9 team in the country at the time from the poll. They get the 11 seed because they're not one of the 2 best schools, but they're still a tremendous school here. So they get in based off their polling as an at-large bid. Then 12, Ole Miss was a very competitive school last year. They get in at the 12 seed. Then you continue with your at-large bids. At 13, you have Oklahoma. 14, LSU. 15, North Carolina State or NC State. And 16, Liberty. And many people would say, why does Liberty deserve to be there? Liberty was right outside the top 25 to end the year. And they were at 23 or 25, I believe. One of the two at the time of the playoff determinations from last year. And you could still say, well, why do they deserve to be there? In this format, what's so cool, when you make sure that the division winner gets in, again, this isn't theoretically perfect, but this is based off of polling and who would make it. You'd have every conference is guaranteed 2 teams. So you know every conference has a fair shot to try to win the college football playoff that year. Plus, you still have 4 at-large bids to reward great teams that just couldn't make it through from injuries aren't going to possibly derail a season as unfairly as they do in college football. Florida State can still get in. You can still have those great teams get there. So you have 4 at-large bids for anyone across the country who isn't a division winner. And then you can have some of those really fun miracle runs like we see in the wild card rounds. Such as last year in the NFL. You saw the 7 seed Packers who just got hot at the right time because their quarterback finally turned the corner. They beat the powerhouse in Dallas and they kicked their ass. And BT Dub, just so everyone can see it because you know I'm a proud Wisconsin Green Bay Packer fan. Country, world, you're fucking welcome. Because we all know America's a better country when the Cowboys lose. And the real America's team took care of business. But back to college football. Oh, lastly, fuck the Cowboys. Now back to college football. But here again, you're seeing the highest representation you can. So you can fairly say each conference gets 2 teams in the college playoff. Plus 4 at-large bids. So everyone is equally represented and the best of college football is still represented. So even when you could say, Liberty doesn't deserve to be there, they're only a top 25 team. Okay. Well, based on their polling, they still make it. Because they're a division winner in a conference. However, they don't get as high of a seed as, let's say, a Missouri. But Missouri was a better team than them last year, theoretically. They don't get as high of a seed as Ole Miss, even though they theoretically would be a division winner and Ole Miss wasn't. Because, frankly, we saw it. What's most determined. So you get away from a lot of the subjectivity of college football in this format. I think that's one of the biggest issues people have with the college football playoff. And then back in the day with the BCS championship game series was, what was it, 2004 or 2005? The number 1 team in the country didn't even play in the national championship game. Because by computer programming, they weren't deserving of that spot. But then a lot of people also argued for that as well, because there's such a subjective nature with too many of these. Here, you get to say this. Most of the time, you're going to have one clear, definitive best team in division. It's not every division's going to be able to, not everybody in a team division is going to be able to play everybody in their division. However, it's going to be pretty goddamn clear for most divisions. The cream will rise to the top. And theoretically, if you really wanted to, you could play a divisional championship game. It's a bit much. I don't think it's necessary. So you still have those vestiges of the fun arguments of college football, but we're getting down far more to a closer exact science of making sure the best teams are represented while also still having reason for divisions and conferences to matter. Now, as we continue back into the format here, here's what I think is the coolest part about it. It makes no sense to me as to why teams couldn't have home bowl games or home championship games. Now, I'm all for an understanding that to make sure that the conference could make more money, you could make the conference championship game a rotating event that cities and stadiums bid on. I understand that. People want that. But then what's super cool about it is you have 8 games right off the bat that the higher seed can have a home game. Imagine the big house in the snow of December with 105,000 screaming, crazy Wolverine fans. And they're hosting a home college football playoff game. Something that's never happened before. This format it can. Imagine Happy Valley. Imagine the whiteout conditions of Penn State there. I'm not talking even snow here. I'm just talking the fun whiteout games that happen at Penn State. They're hosting an Ole Miss. Or vice versa. Look at these fun matchups. Florida State gets to host Oregon. This is where you can say, now the cream rises to the top. If you saw the past episodes of this series, you saw that I broke down conferences as much by geographic location as possible to preserve the history and the tradition of college football and preserving the ability for these players to still be athletes, but still get paid handsomely to do what they're being asked to do and what their ability allows them to do. But now we're to a specialty where less than 10%, or just over 10%, I should say, just over 10% of the teams are actually affected by this. So you can have home playoff games between all these teams. So Florida State can host an Oregon. Or in what, I didn't even rig it this way. I just looked at AP polling and had the science to it. Imagine a first-round playoff game television rating. Mercedes-Benz Dome, down in Atlanta. Georgia hosts Ohio State. Imagine the playoff fervor of getting those two schools in that building. Imagine Georgia getting to have a home game against Ohio State. Such a high-quality opponent that can really give them a run for their money. Imagine a 4-seed like Alabama being challenged by a 13-seed Oklahoma, and the Crimson Tide has to hold off Boomer Sooner in a home playoff game. And you know, not only, whoa, this is big because two teams are playing in a regular season match. No, they're determining their own future now in a playoff game. The stakes are raised. Competition is higher. And the game is better for it. So you see, first round, it's all home playoff games. And then we can go back to our traditional college model of going, now we're going to go to the New Year's 6. We're going to reinvigorate why those games are important, why those games matter. because they determine the best teams in college football. And you can make more of a staple of the Peach Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, and the Sugar Bowl. Those 4 games now determine the final 4 of the college football playoff. They determine who are the 4 best teams. If you want to, especially because it's a wonky time of year for students, you can have those games any night of the week. You don't have to worry about the NFL. You don't have to worry about the NBA. You don't have to worry about primetime television because you are high stakes college football at its finest in those games with tradition that goes back decades, almost centuries in the case of the Rose Bowl. Think about that. So much fun to be had with there. And then you go to your final 4 games and you go to the classic locations of the Rose Bowl and the Orange Bowl. And the Rose Bowl always hosts the bracket for the number 1 seed. It's the granddaddy of them all. It is the biggest college football bowl game in history. In terms of you haven't gotten to a national championship game yet, but if you're still going to have those bowls, it works out perfectly that the New Year's 6 just turn into the 6 best games of the year based off playoffs of who has earned their right to be there. And then because it's the granddaddy of them all, whoever comes out of the number 1 seeded sided bracket, they're playing in the Rose Bowl. Imagine a miracle run of a 16 seed going into the Rose Bowl, beating a number 1 seed, beating a number 8 seed, 2 of the best teams in the country, playing in the Rose Bowl because they've earned it and they deserve it. And a smaller school that goes on a miracle run can go do that. That's the magic and that's the beauty of college football at its finest. That's why I love this format. Is it allows for smaller schools to have a chance to really compete. If they can get to the divisional round, they can do it. And that's what's super cool about this to me. So then you are honoring the history of college football. You're honoring the tradition of college football. But then you still have the ability for those miracle small schools to happen and to have their underdog run that makes us love the sport. And it allows all those 6 games to still be neutral location sites that can be bid on by host cities. They can be rotational outside of the Rose Bowl and the Orange Bowl. So you have 4 new properties that can be bid on because you control them as the College Football Alliance. And you can say, well, who's going to host it? And the Cotton Bowl, obviously, you think the actual Cotton Bowl will host it. But there's no fixed location for the Peach Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl or the Sugar Bowl anymore. They're rotational. So then you can have them be hosted somewhere and still have it. And yes, it's not like the Super Bowl where it rotates every year, but you still could do that. And it generates more money for the schools, for the players, for the partners of the not the NCAA because we're getting rid of them, but for the College Football Alliance. It generates more money for everybody if you do that. That's why I love this thing. It's just successful because it benefits everybody in some way, shape, or form. And then finally, you have proven without a shadow of a doubt, there is no more, well, we didn't get to play them, so it wasn't fair. You know the 2 best teams because they went out and they won and they survived and they beat each other. They beat everybody in their path. You know for a fact the 2 best teams in college football are going to play at the end of the year, and those 2 teams are going to have the right to play for a national championship. It may seem heavy-handed. It may seem like I laid it on thick, but it's the best part about a 16-team playoff for college football. And done with structure and order to make sure that not only can smaller schools have a better chance of being represented, but also more opportunity for those big schools that just something happened to them. Injury, unlucky kick. The wind got to you. Then no one can say, well, the weather. You still get 4 at-large bids. Beyond conference winners and division winners. It's a really, really successful model that allows for more growth of the sport and the cream of the crop to rise to the top. That's what I love about this specific structure for a college football playoff. Why I will preach it till the day I die, because I think it's the right way to do things, and I think it makes perfect sense. And if you think I made perfect sense, I feel like you should try to reward me for it. So, gotta ask you, man. I gotta ask you, please, 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 please. Head over to Etsy shop. Go to ptecreative.etsy.com. Get yourself some cool merch, man. There's some really fine, dope ass merch over at our Etsy shop. We got all kinds of stuff that revolves around the content on our channel. We got Pokemon stuff. We got football stuff. We got national park stuff. We got our own awesome snarky fashion line over with the You Hate to See It line. But we got fictional stuff too. It's got lots of fun stuff. Hoodies, hats, t-shirts, stickers. We've got something for everybody here, and there's only more merchandise being added on a regular basis. So go check out ptecreative.etsy.com. Go get yourself some merch. But that is going to do it for this series. Again, if you just want to know the college football playoff format idea, great. But I highly recommend, if you haven't caught it already, go check out parts 1 and 2 on how to create a better union. We, fans of college football, would love it. Part 1 is all about creating the College Football Alliance. Part 2 was all about conference realignment and how can 6 conferences really work with 2 divisions in each conference. Go check it out. We're also, in the near future, going to be doing, as a weekly release, 1 mega episode with all 3 parts smashed together. So if you just want to wait for everything to be there, that's totally fine. But go check that out as soon as you can. But if you liked this video, or if you liked this podcast over on Spotify, if you're on Spotify, leave us a review. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe. Share this with as many people as you possibly can. Share this with the NCAA so they can know there's another person that doesn't like them and thinks they're incompetent when it comes to this stuff. I don't care. Share it with whoever you wish, whether you think I'm a genius, whether you think I'm in the middle, or whether you think, frankly, my ideas suck. But either way, share it. Let people think about it. Check out our socials over on Instagram and TikTok. Head over to our Etsy shop for more merch. Check out all the other fine programming over at PTE Creative with this awesome, cool stuff over here. You know, like Mondays or Tuesdays with the ONETA show, or Wednesdays with custom Pokemon. Thursdays, you're already here with football. Or Fridays with a rotational basis. There's all kinds of cool stuff. Go check it out. But this concludes the How to Fix and the Time to Fix College Football series. It's been an honor, a privilege as always. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I have been your host, Evan Davies, over here at PTE Creative. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Peace, love, and hugs to you all.